Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Propagandacast Lehr. The topic for today is the humble conscript. The forcefully enrolled conscript, the conscripted conscript, obviously. Fighting for the glory of the Rodina, the motherland. Armed with the most nagant bolt action rifle model something. There were a lot of models of it as the war progressed. It is the standard infantry unit of the Soviet Union. And of course, as of those of you who can actually count, it has 6 members of its squad, which is in fact one of its strengths. At the same time, they do not possess the same body armor as, say, the Grenadier or the Guards Infantry. But on the other hand, overall, if you were to say compare them, Grenadiers, in its essence, the sort of body armor the Grenadiers have is in theory supposed to, by the way, put them on the same health. The difference that it basically means, though, is that while Grenadiers in some regards might be a bit tougher to bullets overall, because ultimately statistics might prove it a bit more that way and can ultimately with upgrades provide more bullets. The thing is, though, conscripts overall do possess a lot more survivability due to this 6 numbers in their squad, since that basically means they're a lot less bloody likely to get wiped out in a single mortar strike, grenade, or tank shot. And in that lies in one of the conscript squad's greatest strengths. That is, it is considerably less likely to get wiped out in one blow. Of course, that hardly means they're immortal. They can be quite likely they're just easily killed by something else, like say lots of bullets, because that is surprisingly one of the weaknesses. So of course that is something to consider. Of course another one is, of course, you don't need any building to get them, so you can easily get a bunch of them without having to build any buildings. So of course that is another little advantage. Other abilities they do possess, for example, is actually setting up heavy cover where actually you want, thanks to their sandbag fighting precision. Something not a lot of players use of, but again can actually suddenly turn a battlefield to their advantage if properly utilized. So that is another little fun fact, and another little strength of them. And of course that is vital to remember. Now another thing you can consider about their larger squad sizes is it also means that as you lose squad members overall compared to a German infantry unit, you're actually also losing less fighting power. If a Grenadier loses a unit, that's 1/4 of the unit's fighting power. If you lose a conscript, that's 1/5. Or 1/6 in fact. I mean, that's a bit of a difference overall. And again, something that should not necessarily be neglected or taken lightly. That's another little fun one.
Fresh conscripts have arrived.
And of course, up close overall, conscripts do tend to advantage. And of course, not to ignore the noble Molotov, or at least the handy Molotov. A handy weapon again there. Can easily deny cover to your opponent. Can be used to clear out buildings as well. In that regard, also quite handy. And also importantly, the Molotov ignores infantry armor. So it doesn't matter that they're Grenadiers, that they're tough. It doesn't matter if they're veteran. Overall, your Molotov will just damage them and in the good likelihood kill them. In that regard, the Molotov is actually also one of your conscript's strongest weapons, since it can dictate where your opponent can actually have your infantry standing. You can even deny a building, for example, with it. In that regard, you can actually force your opponent out of cover, deny him cover, force him out of buildings, and so on. So in many regards, quite the powerful little weapon. In that regard, it's definitely not something that should be ignored or underestimated.
Riflemen ready.
Same thing, of course, here with the sandbag fighting precision. Not so often used, though you will see certain veteran players like Steven actually utilizing them again. They can, again give you a bit of an advantage where there's otherwise no heavy cover. And of course, we have the ubiquitous Hoorah, which helps them actually in the early game grant a lot of mobility compared to your opponent's infantry. And for that matter, support weapons allow you to constantly outmaneuver them. And again, there we go. Molotov and an MG42. Almost immediately one poor sword bursts into flames. Another one does. Again, do not underestimate the Molotov. and of course the effect it can have on the MG4. And again, you know, lots of conscripts can easily allow you to outmaneuver any opponent's support weapons. There's a Syrian, the opponent here, doing his best to sort of, you know, keep them covering each other. Ultimately fails and ultimately gets sorted out. So there are a lot of things, these conscripts with their Molotovs, and that of course is just one part of it.
We are taking losses.
Just one part of it.
Waiting orders. Aim fire on this position.
Here standing by.
Your command.
So another little thing there, of course, to sort of remember in the great fight against fascism. And of course, another part of it overall was also that they're quite modifiable via doctrines. For example, you have the quite commonly used, you know, conscript assault package, which pops up a pair of submachine guns on your conscripts, increasing their firepower considerably up close. Even to an extent to mid-range, it also helps them a bit there. Overall, a nasty little weapon. Again, nothing that should be ignored. And overall, just, you know, just gives you that much more firepower, and also makes it harder for your opponent to sort of take up any positions. And a lot of players do tend to favour getting doctrines that hand you these guard rifles. Is popular. Short rifle is also popular, but of course not the only sort of thing that modifies your conscripts via doctrines. You've got the ones that give you hit the dirt, which are also quite useful. You've got one that gives you the ability for your conscript to repair your tanks, which is also quite amazing. Right here we see Grenadiers versus conscript. Of course LMG here, but of course the LMG needs to stand still to fire the conscript up close. Actually is able to sort of actually keep up with the damage output of the LMG equipped Grenadier squad like that. And of course, compared to the Grenadier squad, the light machine gun, it actually, you know, doesn't have to worry about moving that much. And of course, now hitting that 22, it becomes even more lethal. And overall there, quickly in fact overwhelms the Grenadier squad. With the light machine, in fact, wipes it out. And now, of course, we see another strength of the conscript squad, merging. Again, not necessarily used a lot by people, and again, particularly sort of the novice to intermediate level, but again, it's a powerful ability. Right here we saw Ginan Gugap, which I believe was the Spirit of Odin. That could pierce for anything if I'm not entirely mistaken, but either way, quickly reinforcing and merging with a conscript squad, which reached Veteran 2, which otherwise would have been forced back due to a lack of anything that could reinforce it, of course. But instead, you know, just use a raw conscript squad, merge, and then have this Veteran 2 unit keep fighting at the front line. It's a very powerful ability, of course, could also be used at other units, that keep in mind. If you, for example, use a Guardian for your shock troops, I mean, they will get the armor of the conscript squad, and then penal troops work nice, but even then, I mean, you can even use the Guardian if you feel like it, if you just want to keep fighting, just use the firepower. So again, not something that should be scoffed at, not something that should be underestimated or ignored. So then again, it allows you to basically reinforce the unit, for example, at also lower cost. Also good for keeping a support weapon in the fight, field gun, MG, mortar. In that way, it can allow you to keep a field presence on the field. And again, that is also one of the conscript strengths overall. They can last much longer on a field than, say, a Grenadier squad, which again, quickly loses combat effectiveness. And overall, unless there's a half check or something like that, you know, can't really enforce in the field either very easily. So there are a lot of things there to consider in that regard. Though again, note, otherwise, I mean, they do possess some old things. Again, those are lots of bullets. So in that regard, you generally want to be careful about charging into light machine guns and Panzer Grenadier. So again, one of many things. They also have anti-tank grenades. The one thing to remember, of course, is, you know, they have a chance of not penetrating your opponent's armor, and overall you usually want to aim for the rear, or, you know, attack them in the rear, thus having the best chance of penetrating and damaging the engine. But overall, quite handy, but overall, don't expect your conscripts to do all the fighting against light vehicles. The anti-tank grenade is great, but again, against tanks and such, you're basically just doing it to sort of make things worse for the fascist tanks, and allow your other units to sort of deal with it.
The enemy is taking what we have secured. We have it.
And we've got the tripwire flares ability, which quite handily gives you the ability to sort of pop down a little mine, which might kill someone, but otherwise gives you a flare, which again gives you increased line of sight all of a sudden in that particular spot. Again, little handy ability from time to time, though not always, I will admit that. But again, good usage of it can actually disrupt your opponent, plus it's actually pretty cheap. So hardly bad. I mean, overall, the Conscript squad is quite the versatile and handy little unit. Should not be underestimated, neither by you or by your opponent. Of course, again, they are hardly immortal, and in particular suffer to exposed gunfire.
Our territory is falling into enemy hands.
But again, you're also less likely to just get them wiped out in the blink of an eye, compared to, say, the Grenadier.
Units awaiting orders.
So again, they do possess their strengths. They do possess their strengths, and of course hit the dirt, which allows them to basically pop down and immediately hit up light cover wherever they are. Also, quite handy. So when you look at all those things, your conscripts do possess quite some skills, quite some abilities, of course also their weaknesses, and then again, you know, they should be kept in mind when actually utilising your conscripts. Otherwise you are very likely to end up losing them very quickly. But again, use them aggressively, use them to flank, use this greater speed than your opponent, usually with hoorah, and their greater durability can usually sort of pull something off very nicely. And again, merge, ladies and gentlemen. Merge that again, lovely Molotov right there. Immediately bursts one core sword into the fire and forces the rest out into the open where they become easier targets. Again, a good little trick to remember. A good little thing to remember. So in that regard, you know, a lot of things to keep in mind with your conscripts. And I'll just pause here because this is probably sort of where one finishes on this little video about sort of the conscript basics. But again, a rather core and key unit to the service, which again through the Doctrine can actually pull off a lot of different things. And I certainly don't think that will change as more commanders are at it. There'll likely be some new stuff for the conscripts to do as well, for that matter. So again, don't underestimate your conscripts. Don't think of them lightly. I mean, they do possess certain advantages, and overall you can keep them alive. I mean, overall they are going to be a lot more likely to survive than your opponent's Grenadiers, Panzer Grenadiers, MG Crews and Pioneers, simply again through the fact that they do possess larger numbers, and that overall does make a considerable difference. And again, you know, upgrades, and again it also means, for example, they can easily pick up, say, a weapon, and again be a lot less likely to drop it, which is also a handy little ability. So there you go. I hope this little video was entertaining and hopefully most importantly actually educational and enlightening regarding conscripts, what they can sort of do. I mean, I'll probably make a video sort of more specifically marking out some of the conscript tactics, but overall, I mean, conscripts are a rather broad section in some regards. You know, they'll probably require a few more, a bit like, you know, say the Grenadiers as well. But again, core unit, lots of versatility if properly utilised, if properly realised. And again, they'd be quite speedy, they can deny cover, they can deny buildings, they can clear out units. Even their anti-tank grenades are quite helpful in times, and again, they can also modify the battlefield to their advantage considerably. One of the weaknesses, though, is overall fighting from a building. They don't tend to get smashed because overall the most windows they'll ever be available tends to be only 4, which is actually quite an optimal number for the Grenadiers, but again, for the conscripts means overall, you know, you won't get quite as much out of it. So unless you actually manage to sneak in a light machine gun or something, I mean, usually you want to be a bit more careful. That's not to say you shouldn't be doing it at all. And again, some regards they can actually be quite durable in fighting from a building. But again, there are some things to consider again that you might, you know, always keep in mind. Again, that you might not get the full fighting power out of them. But again, that's not to say you shouldn't ever do it, but be a bit judicious in it. Anyways, this is Imperial Dane saying cheers. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something from it. If you did, want to subscribe to your friends. If you didn't, well, why not? Simply provide some feedback in the comments. And cheers.